There's an author that I've been reading recently that is quite rapidly climbing the ranks and clawing her way into my pool of favorite authors and immediate buys. And I wanted to talk about that author today and about why I think she's so good at what she does. And that is Emily Henry. Welcome back to StoryTube. I would probably call Emily Henry the queen of the contemporary rom-com in book form at the moment. And for a long time, I was lumping her into the same category as Colleen Hoover. So I haven't read a lot of romance, as you might know if you follow the channel. I read romance for the first time really in December of last year. I had tried Colleen Hoover before that, but I tried Verity, which was more of like a thriller, so I didn't quite count that. I also had read some Taylor Jenkins Reid previously, but mainly like Daisy Jones and the Six and the Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which have romance in them, but it's not the focal point of it all. So it was the first time I delved into proper contemporary romance, and I found that I quite enjoyed myself, and I've been picking up a couple here and there ever since. And the main one that I've read is Emily Henry. And the reason I bring up the Colleen Hoover comparison is that Colleen Hoover happened to be one of the first like TikTok-y authors that I picked up and didn't like her at all. Trying to be extremely diplomatic, she's just not an author that appeals to me. And for the longest time, I just thought that Emily Henry was the same kind of author, that it was all about like the shocking plot elements and contrived situations and the explicit content in the books. So I was never really interested in trying her. I saw her appealing to a lot of the same audience, or at least that's what I thought, until last December when I picked up Beach Read first and then Book Lovers. And I absolutely loved both of those books. And ever since, I've been trying some more contemporary romance, and I keep coming back to Emily Henry, and that nobody that I've found so far quite does it the way she does. And even though I've found that I have discovered a new genre that I quite enjoy, and I can blast through romance books in like 24 hours and it's just fun, none of them have been as good as Emily Henry's books. And if you told me that I can only ever read one romance book in my every year, or one author for the rest of my life, I would happily pick Emily Henry and just read her new release every year, and that's kind of it. And that would probably be enough in terms of romance. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why she works so well for me and why I think she is so good and has nailed that formula down to a T, while still giving you enough new elements that every book, for now anyway, feels new. So full disclosure, I have read 4 of her 5 books. I have yet to read Happy Place, which is the one that came out in 2023 and just came out in the paperback format. I did read Beach Read and Book Lovers basically back to back. Then I read You and Me on Vacation, or People We Meet on Vacation. There's a different title in the US and in the UK and Australia for some reason, in January. And I read Funny Story, which is her new release that came out a couple of weeks ago on release day within like 36 hours. I'll give you a bit of a ranking maybe at the end, but it just got me thinking because Funny Story is the 4th Emily Henry book that I read, and I did recognize some elements of like, oh, this is kind of similar to Beach Read. Oh, this reminds me of Book Lovers or whatever, or like, is this like a flip side of You and Me on Vacation? And it just got me thinking about all those elements that she keeps using that work so well. So the first and the most obvious thing that every good romance book needs is a believable dynamic between the main characters, right? So you want to believe that these two characters are actually falling in love with each other, and you want to have fun with their chemistry and their banter. So I think Emily Henry is extremely good at dialogue between characters, and I think like the banter thing is kind of a tricky one to nail down, because you don't want them to just be bickering, which is something that I've already noticed in some of the other romance that I've read, where it's fun at first, but if it's just constant bickering, you might buy the fact that there's sexual tension, but not more than that. And Emily Henry is quite good at balancing banter with more deeper like conversations and them actually getting to know each other. So you do believe that these people, first of all, have an attraction and then are slowly falling in love with each other. She really nails the pacing of the relationship developing. And then the second thing tied to the main romantic plotline is obviously there's a need for conflict. If two people are just meeting and falling in love and then they're together, you don't really have much of a book. So there needs to be some force that keeps them from getting together or makes them split up halfway through or something like that. I think it's easy for that to become contrived, to over rely on miscommunication between the two people, which ends up just getting me thinking, well, they're never going to last because clearly they can't talk to each other. Or it's something that the characters in my mind can't really come back from. For example, if there's cheating involved and that is something that splits them up, I'm never going to be invested in that relationship again. Never say never, I guess, but that's just a no-go for me. So I think it's quite difficult to toe the line where the drama comes from a place that makes sense. And sometimes I enjoy my like melodramatic stuff and like, you know, you can suspend your disbelief a little bit, but only to a certain extent. And I think Emily Henry is very good and she gets better throughout her books. I think this is like where You and Me on Vacation with was her first book is a little bit weaker. But I think she's very good at creating conflict that comes either from a place of character, and I'll get to that a bit later, or conflict that is external that then makes the characters behave in a certain way. And there might be some miscommunication involved, but the miscommunication is caused by external factors plus them being who they are and like having the lived experience that they have. So it's more, not just more believable miscommunication, but just miscommunication that doesn't come from either of them not behaving like an adult. So I think Book Lovers is very good at that. I think Funny Story is very good at that as well, where the characters are communicating, are being rational and mature, and yet there's still some angst there and there's still some drama and some unresolved issues. I do think like she very clearly improves that like as the books go on. So the order of publication was You and Me on Vacation, I believe Beach Read, Book Lovers, then Happy Place, which is the one I haven't read, and then Funny Story. So when I say that the conflict can come from a place of character, the other thing that I think Emily Henry is great at, that is just as important and just as enjoyable to me as the romantic plot is that she always has the main character and some of the side characters, or like at least the love interest, dealing with something outside of the romantic relationship. And it's usually in and around them coming to terms with their family situation, whatever that is, and ultimately being at peace with it and deciding what they want to do with their lives. So generally the main characters are in and around 30, which is also something that I appreciate. I think if I read, especially contemporary romance, it's a bit different in fantasy, but contemporary romance where the characters are like college age, I'm just a bit like, well, get over it, you'll be fine. So I like when the characters are more around my age or a little bit older, but they have to behave like they're that age. So all of these characters have been working for a while, are like established adults, but they're still dealing with like, well, what do I want to do long term though? Or like, I stumbled into this career after college, that's not what I wanted, what do I want to do now? And they're all in a position where they have some kind of issue with maybe siblings or parents or like extended family, whatever that is. Everybody's dealing with something. And what I really appreciate about Emily Henry is that it's not about this subplot being tied up happily with a bow and fixing the issues. It's more about the characters coming to terms with what the situation is. For example, if there's like an absent parent, and that, you know, is very hurtful. It's not about the absent parent at the end of the book showing back up and being great and apologizing and everybody's happy. It's more about the fact that the main character is dealing with the fact that this happened and that they can move on from it, and that it doesn't have to define who they are. And I really love that. Particularly, this kind of got me thinking about it when I was reading Funny Story. I thought that in Funny Story, this is exceptionally well done, and in Book Lovers as well, where I was very invested in that side of the plot, which is the subplot, right? Because the romantic plot is the main source of conflict and the driver of the story. But it gives a lot of depth to the main character, to both main characters, and also gives depth to the relationship, because they will behave in a certain way based on what they've learned and how they've learned to behave, and like the kind of relationship that they saw with their parents, for example, which is what I mean when I say that the conflict comes from a place of character, because maybe one of them will have like abandonment issues and the other one is just very, I don't know, aloof, or does something and then like they immediately assume that, you know, they're being abandoned, which is a miscommunication, but it's coming from a place of, we are getting to know each other, we don't know this about each other yet, and assumptions are being made based on past experiences. I mean, these are not books that are meant to make you reflect about the depths of human psychology. They are a warm blanket and a cup of tea or coffee or whatever makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. So it is very wholesome, and it's perfect for when you're feeling a little bit adrift or anxious, and it's very accepting of being whoever you are. And that sounds a little bit cheesy, and you might not always be in the mood for that, absolutely, but I think every once in a while it just feels so healing to read something like that, because it is well written and there's real depth to it. The last thing, which is the most minor but I just really like, is that generally her books are imbued with a love of books and storytelling and writing. Of course, this is not unusual for books, because writers love books and readers love books. Shocking. Obviously, it's quite common to have like characters that love books, characters that are writers, etc. But that doesn't mean that I don't love it. So there's always like this really wholesome love and really pure love of books and storytelling. The one that has this the least is You and Me on Vacation. But then, for example, in Beach Read, we have two writers. In Book Lovers, we have an editor and a writer. In Funny Story, we have a librarian and a man who doesn't read, which is the ultimate conflict, obviously. And it's just a nice undercurrent of that you can latch onto easily as a reader. And every character is distinct enough in each book where like you wouldn't interchange January from Beach Read with Nora from Book Lovers. They are very different people. Then Daphne from Funny Story is again a very different person. It makes the books distinct enough, in my mind anyway. I mean, maybe one day when Emily Henry has written 25 books, you'll start to get confused and then you don't know what's what, especially because the titles and the covers are kind of interchangeable. But I do appreciate that she always gives you a slightly different character, which is why I think anybody reading her books might latch onto a different one as their favorite, depending on what character you might identify with the most, or what love interest is your favorite, or whatever. Tropes, of course. So we're talking about romance, so we need to talk about tropes very briefly. I won't get too much into it. Are these books tropey? Yeah, it's a tropey genre, so like there are tropes. I think she does them really well. In Book Lovers, for example, she plays with tropes of the genre while still being tropey, but she like winks at them a little bit with like the main character describes herself as the woman that the love interest in any rom-com ditches in order to fall in love with the main character. She's like the cold-hearted, career-driven woman in New York City. And I mean, then the book still goes on to be like tropey, but she does like play with them. Like we go to a small town and her sister's like, are you going to fall in love with a small town guy? And like, I won't spoil it, but it's not as straightforward as it would be. So like, it's really fun in that way. In Funny Story, the concept or the main like blurb is that Daphne, who's the main character, is engaged to Peter, and Peter leaves her for his female best friend after his bachelor party. So Daphne moves in with said female best friend's ex, and they decide to pretend that they're dating in order to annoy them, and then they obviously end up actually dating. But I thought that was a nice twist to the friends to lovers trope, which is in You and Me on Vacation. So friends to lovers, you know, you have two best friends, platonic, and for years they're just best friends, and then eventually they realize that they've been in love all along. And I think this can work. I think One Day, for example, by David Nichols, is one where this works really well because you can tell why they didn't get together until a certain point. But it's a fine line to walk, and more often than not with that trope, I just find myself thinking, the poor people these guys have dated, like they're dating people and just emotionally cheating because they're in love with their best friend and just not realizing it or communicating it. And it just kind of frustrates me. So I liked in Funny Story that we essentially have like Peter is living his own friends to lovers thing, but we're looking at the people that get left. So I really like that. And she does that very well, where she plays with these tropes while still using them because she clearly loves them and they're just really fun. In terms of the tropes that are in the books, so You and Me on Vacation, as mentioned, is a friends to lovers. So these two friends that met in college just meet up every year to go on vacation together. And after like 12 years, they finally realize they might be more than friends. This is a cute one. It's not badly written at all. It's just that it's a little bit too fluffy, I think. I want a little bit more angst. I think sometimes with romance, the thing is, after they like get together sort of the first time, and then there's some kind of conflicts that separates them, sometimes I can then lose interest. Or like just like get a bit like deflated because you're coming towards the end and you're like, well, I know what the end is going to be. I already know, I can see how they're going to get back together or whatever. And this happened to me a little bit with You and Me on Vacation, whereas all of the other Emily Henry books I've read, I have been interested until the last page. She has kept me hooked until the last page. And she's left me with the feeling that I would want to read a book about these two characters just being happy and together. I don't need it just to be conflict. And I think that is the mark of a really good romance. So I would rank You and Me on Vacation at number 4 out of the 4 that I've read. Next up, Beach Read is great. And this is the one with the two writers. He writes pretentious literary fiction. She writes cute, tropey romance books. And they are rivals / enemies. They don't like each other at all. At least that's what you kind of think at the beginning. And they end up in the same small town for summer and they have writer's block, so they try to swap genres. She tries to write pretentious literary fiction and he tries to write tropey romance, and it is so funny, so cute, and I enjoyed myself immensely. However, it is at number 3 out of the 4 that I've read because I love the other two so much. Next up, there's Book Lovers, and Book Lovers is amazing. Like I mentioned already, it's about like the subversion of the tropes. So we have the main character is Nora, and she's a literary agent, and the love interest is Charlie, who is an editor, and they are also professional rivals who find out that they don't actually dislike each other that much eventually. Spoiler alert. And it's wonderful, and it's my favorite Emily Henry. I want to reread this book forever. Then there's Happy Place, which I have learned is a second chance romance. I have not read this one yet, but I will soon. And it's about, you know, the couple who are like the perfect couple, and they always go on holidays with their friends, but this year they have actually broken up and not told anybody, but they're obviously going to get back together. And it just doesn't appeal as much to me because I'm like, if you broke up, there was probably a reason for that, so maybe don't get back together. But I trust Emily Henry to give me a good reason. So we'll see. I shall report back. I'll be reading it soon, I'm sure, sometime this year. But as of yet, not ranked because I haven't read it. And then the last one, funny story, where we have Daphne the librarian who moves in with Miles, her ex-fiance's ex-fiance, and it's a fake dating trope, so they pretend to date sort of to annoy their exes and try to get to them. And she's a librarian and he is a bartender, and it's a great story, to be honest. They're just fantastic characters. I was not quite sure at times would it overtake Book Lovers, but I love Book Lovers too much. I love Charlie too much, so Book Lovers still has the edge, but Funny Story is great, and it is a funny story. That's it, really. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Emily Henry and why I think she's so good at what she does. She's like the romance writer, the contemporary romance writer, at least. I haven't really dabbled into period romance or like romantasy all that much. Obviously romantasy, Sarah J Maas. But in terms of contemporary romance right now, she is the author to read, and I am very happy to report that she is worth it. She deserves all the praise and she deserves all her success. And I think if you want to give that genre a go and try it out, Emily Henry is absolutely the way to go. And you don't really have to go all that much further than that. At least as far as my exploration has gone, I haven't read that much yet. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. Anybody who you think is similar to Emily Henry, as good as Emily Henry, better than Emily Henry, please let me know. Let me know what your favorite Emily Henry is in the comments if you have one, or if you haven't read her yet, which one of these may appeal to you. And yeah, like the video if you enjoyed it, if you would like me to talk more about this kind of stuff, and feel free to dislike it if you don't, that's fine. And consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet, and all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.